We are the nerds. We are the nerds of the apocalypse.
Come on down.
Thank you. All right. Hi, everybody. I was expecting a much smaller room and more intimate crowd. I have a very low-tech presentation. So, anyway, I've seen a lot of great costumes here today. And I just, I love cosplay. You be my life. I have some handouts. These are basically my notes that so y'all wouldn't have to write stuff down. Well, this might come in handy. I only have 50 copies. And I think we have more than 50 people here. So, sorry, I'll bring more tomorrow. Can you take one and pass it down, please? It's two-sided, one sheet. I have been doing this stuff for a very long time, and I have learned a lot, and I would like to try and teach as much as I can in as short a time as possible. So we have a lot to cover. When I first started, today we're just going to cover paper mache and foam rubber. And tomorrow I'm having a class, we're going to talk on plastic sheeting, latex and foam latex and basic mold making. But today is paper mache and foam, and if you're not interested in paper mache and foam, then sorry. All right, let's look at our little handout sheet here on the one that says paper and paste. We'll start with paper mache. Everybody here knows who Rick Baker is, right? A lot of people kind of poo-poo paper mache, like, that's kid stuff. Rick Baker posted about 3 weeks ago on his website, he made a full, like a life-size Nosferatu out of paper mache. If paper mache is good enough for Rick Baker, hey, I always refer to paper mache as the artist's friend. You probably have everything you need to make paper mache lying around your house right now. And you just don't know it. But most basic paper mache is newspaper. I made a few masks. A friend of mine says, well, you never try to put Elmer's glue in your paste. I said, no. So I tried that on a mask, and the glue mixes with the water and the flour, and it makes it just so much smoother. It gets all the lumps out. It just was like, wow, that's great. And that worked really well. And then I started thinking, well, if Elmer's glue works well, I bet wood glue would work even better. So I started using water, flour, and wood glue. And the wood glue dried a lot harder. And again, the wood glue, when it mixes with the flour and the water, just makes it, so much smoother. It gets all the lumps out, and it works really well. One of the major drawbacks of the wood glue is it dries fairly quickly. After about 20 or 30 minutes, your hands start getting crusty. So you have to wash them off. Now you have to be very careful. Do not wash this stuff off in your sink unless you want to call a plumber and get your drain cleaned out, because that stuff will dry up in your pipe. So go outside or have a bucket of water that you can rinse off with, but eventually that stuff will dry pretty fast. Then this friend of mine says, well, that's okay, but the best stuff is wallpaper paste. And this guy, his name is Lewis, and he makes movies. He has a character he created named Rocky. He does giant monster movies. And he had his Rocky mask, and he was beating it on the desk. And he's like, man, you could club somebody to death with this. It was brown paper and wallpaper paste. And if you build up enough layers of the brown paper and the wallpaper paste, you could use it to hammer nails. It's amazing stuff. You can get brown paper if you go to the grocery store, paper or plastic. You just ask them, can I have a couple of paper bags? They will usually give you paper bags. You want to get the big, large economy size. That's the thicker paper. But like everything, they don't make it like they used to. Paper bags now are about a half or a third of the thickness that it used to be when I was young. But it's still, it's still a lot more durable than than newspaper. But it's not as flexible either. You can mix any of these materials. You can mix the flour and water with the wallpaper paste. You can mix the brown paper with newspaper. The thing about the newspaper is, you can mush it up and get a lot more pliable, and you can do much more subtle sculpting with it. So what I do usually anymore is I'll make a base of the brown paper to give it a really good firm foundation, and then I'll do my detailing on top with the newspaper. So what I usually do when I start out is I'll have my paper and I will start tearing it in strips. If you tear your paper instead of cutting it, the rough edges and it kind of tapers the edge a little bit. You can blend your edges a lot better. You don't see the seams because of the irregularity of the tear. And paper has a grain. Tabloid paper tends to tear from side to side, and large full-page newspaper tears from top to bottom. But you'll know if you go to start tearing it and it starts curving, you're tearing against the grain. So if it's just tearing in nice, fairly straight lines, then you're going with the grain. And what I like to do is I'll start off with a big pile of different size strips. I'll have big long pieces for large areas, and I'll have smaller and smaller pieces. Because when you've got paste all over your hands, you don't want to have to go back and start trying to tear more paper. It's nice to have a nice big pile to start with, so you have whatever size and shape you have right there. So let me look at my notes. All right, so we covered that. They sell this stuff at like Michael's and Hobby Lobby. That's a paper mache. It comes in like a big plastic jar, and it's just mulched up like finely ground paper and paste all mixed together. And you can mix that stuff with water and actually pour it in molds. So it's it comes in handy for some stuff. That stuff will kind of flake off. It's not real dense or heavy duty, but you can get some really subtle details with it, and you can just like model it on top of your paper mache. You can also put modeling paste on top of paper mache and get a really nice smooth. I made a costume years ago. I was told to plan on not having any audio video equipment, so I printed out pictures. This is a copy of a book I started 15 years ago and have never completed. These are some of the masks that I've made over the years. But I made a mask of the fly, and for his compound eye, I covered it with modeling paste, and I took a straight edge and just went over the top of it while it was still kind of damp, and made all the, the compound parts of the eye, and it looked really pretty cool. It's here somewhere. Anyway. Alright. But one thing you have to watch out for here in the South, we have these lovely creatures called spice bugs. Spice bugs like to eat paper mache paste if you use flour and water or flour and Elmer's glue. I made a few masks and I started noticing this white powder underneath them. I'm like, what is that? I looked in it and there were tiny little bugs were in there. They were eating the paste. They do not like the wood glue though, and they do not like the paper mache paste. So, word of the wise, if you make one with just the flour and water or just even the Elmer's glue, they will eat that stuff. So, all right. So once you've made your your creation. Oh, well, okay, let me go back a little bit. The first several masks that I made, I bought large balloons. I just go down the Dollar Tree, and I buy a lot of times those, bounce back balloons, or the large balloons, and then I would start papering on top of that. And then once I had a couple of coats on it, then I'd probably add like a piece of cardboard around it for the neck. And so for years I used balloons to make all my masks with. Then I started just buying sheets of poster board from the Dollar Tree and cutting shapes and then papering over this. Rocket here, his head is paper mache covered in faux fur. And while I was sitting at my booth this morning, I whipped up a kind of a basic shape of what Rocket started out as. It's just a piece of poster board from the Dollar Tree, cut into shape and masking tape together. I'm going to pass this around so y'all can kind of see what it looks like. That's like 4 pieces of paper. Don't worry about it. So I started making everything out of cardboard, and one of the things about paper mache is you've got to be patient. You can't put a lot of coats on top of each other. It's like that one right there right now, if I were to go paper that, I'd probably get some brown paper and I would put just, one coat over the seams where the tape is right now, and then I'd leave it alone. I wouldn't even cover the whole 9 yards, just where it's joined together. Let that sit overnight, and when it's good and dry, then I would put my next coat on. I found out that if you put, when I first was starting out, I was putting 3-4 layers on, and the outside would be dry, but the inside would still be mushy. So I tried drying it with my hair dryer. That's great for drying the outside. The inside was still mushy. So you have to, layer it slowly. Now, if I'm in a real hurry, I have a little space heater, and I'll put one thin coat on and put the space heater on it on low, and 2 or 3 hours later it'll be dry. But it's really better just let nature take its course and let it dry thoroughly overnight. All right, so painting. All right, so once you have your creation, another thing. Another thing that I use a lot of times is paper towel and TP tubes when they're empty. You can make horns with those with just a little bit of snipping here and there and a little tape. Just anything that's paper you can model as your basis for your sculpt. Another thing you can use is, y'all know what rigid wrap is? Rigid wrap is plaster bandages. You can buy that stuff at Michael's, or you can buy it at Hobby Lobby, and it's like $4 a roll, and you might need 2 rolls to do a pretty decent area. Or you can go online to the company that makes rigid wrap, and you can buy a case for about $50, which has like 24 rolls in it. So, it's much, much more. They sell directly to the public. As long as you buy a case, you can, it's like $1 or $2 a roll, as opposed to going down the hobby store and paying 3 or 4 times that. So, rigid wrap. Rigid wrap interacts with paper mache also. So, a lot of times, I use rigid wrap sometimes if I'm making a shoulder. I'll just rigid wrap my shoulder. Just, I'll coat it myself, that's how I do it. And then once it sets, I have, the form of my shoulder. And then you use paper mache over that, and then add that to your head, your mask, and, anyway. So all this stuff will work together. All right, so painting. You can paint any water-based paint will work on water on paper mache. Tempera, acrylic, airbrush works great. Gouache, watercolor tube paint kind of works. It's not quite as opaque, but a lot of my stuff I tend to use just regular spray paint. But I learned years ago there are different kinds of spray paint. I had sprayed a mask with an acrylic spray paint, and then I went to cover it with enamel. Guess what happened? The enamel ate the acrylic. I'm painting and all of a sudden it's just like bubbling and dripping. I'm like, what's going on? I look at my cans like, oh. So you can't mix different kinds of spray paint. And see, I learned a lot from my mistakes. So, all right. So yes, always test your paint first. I was making my Iron Man armor, which was styrene sheeting, and I was using this Krylon plastic paint, and I was putting my a coat on. I had a brand new can right off the shelf from the hardware store, and I go to spray it. Big blobs all over my 3 or 4 coats I already had on there. I had to sand it all down and start over. Always test your paint first. Have a little board next to you that's your scrap board, and test that paint before you go to apply it on your art. It'll save you a lot of headaches. All right. So after I finish my my creation, I like to seal it up with water-based polyurethane. I usually use the Minwax. They were like the first people to come out with this stuff, and I love this stuff. You put it on with a big brush, and it looks like you're brushing milk on. And put a coat on, let it dry. I usually tend to put 2 or 3 coats on, and I'll coat the inside, I'll coat the outside. And they come in different finishes. They come in a gloss and a satin gloss, which is kind of in the middle. And it's hard to tell, but on Modoc, I've got the satin on his face, but then I have on his teeth and his mouth is the gloss. If you get the right light, you can kind of see that the lips and the teeth have a more reflective surface than the rest of it. It's a subtle thing. I mean, it's but anyway. All right. So Modoc. We'll talk about Modoc sprays with paper mache. I started off. I had a 55-gallon drum, and the hardest part of this costume was cutting this plastic. I did not realize this stuff was like 3/4, like almost half an inch thick. And I thought I'd come in there with my X-Acto, score a little bit, get me a jig, my hacksaw. Oh no. Days and days of trying to cut it. I finally got a little slot that I could get a jigsaw blade in. And so I got my power jigsaw. Anyway, so once I cut that piece out, then that's what I sculpted the face on. Because I knew that would fit right back into the slot. And all the detailing on the face is Dollar Tree poster board that was cut up in different shapes. The little rocket head I'm passing around, they're a little like, if you cut these little slots along the edge of your paper, you can bend it up and tape it together, and you can make dome shapes. And eventually you play around with this, you start to get a pretty good idea of, if I cut it like this and bend it like this, then, it's going to wind up like this. So that's all the detailing on this face is. It's just, it's poster board. This shape eventually, it originally looked kind of like a kidney, and we cut the edges around and bend it up, and tape it all together. And so, like I said, I love paper mache. When I was in 2nd grade, we had learned about paper mache in school, and in the summer my parents were gone to work, And I decided I was going to make myself this big old brontosaurus statue. When my folks got home, I had this beautiful 3-foot-long brontosaurus waiting on them. And I'd also had destroyed my kitchen, our kitchen. My dad was not a happy man. I didn't sit down for a few days, and I was forbidden to ever make paper mache again in their house. So, got news for you, Dad. I'm an adult now. I can make paper mache anytime I want. And I tend to make at least one paper mache project a year. I just like getting my hands all gooey, and I just love it. There's so much you can do with it. This is like an alien mask. This is one of my first masks. This is like 20-something years ago. It kind of evolved from that to, this is Fluffy the werewolf. And Fluffy's snout was actually a paper towel roll. And his ears. This is a set of wild things, you know, where the wild things are, big Maurice Sendak. I made 3 of the wild things, and I donated these costumes to the main library on Assembly Street, and they still have them in the children's room. So I build these giant things, and it fills up my house. And every so often, my wife says, "You need to get rid of some of those, John. We need a little space. Can't walk around in the house anymore." Like, yes, dear. Oh, there's the fly. I'm going to pass these around too. All right, and I guess that's about it for foam rubber. I mean, for a paper mache. We'll start getting on foam rubber here. Oh, this is Piggy. Hard to tell from this picture, but Piggy is covered in very fine white fur. The way I did that was we have a white cat, and we would brush stripes every few days and get a nice little pile of white fur, and I'd sit there with super glue pasting individual hairs on. Took about 2 or 3 weeks to fur Piggy. That's a lot of patience. But he looks really good. All right, I'm going to pass some of these around. This was the giant ant that I made in the middle of production. This was also pretty early. It's probably late 90s, mid 90s. The hardest part of that was cutting all the eye holes. And his mandibles opened and closed. I had them rigged. They were on a little swivel, and I had a little elastic strap here, and I just had to bend my head back and forth. And so, pretty cool little special effect there. And my son isn't here. This is Mandarin Spawn. Any Spawn fans out there? That's all paper mache. I loaned this costume to a friend of mine, and he wore it out for Halloween, and he went to a friend's house, and he forgot my mask. He brought everything else back, and I said, "Well, where's the head?" "Oh, I'll go get it." And he went back, and his friend's wife had thrown it out. So without the head, it was kind of useless, and I wound up throwing the rest of him away. But, all right, last but not least, well, actually, I'm going to hang on to him for a minute. All right, if you don't mind, I want to like I said, very low tech. Back to this side of it. Around. Don't worry about them. All right. Foam rubber. Enough about paper mache. There's the finished picture of the man. My Fred Flintstone shirt on. All right, foam rubber. What have I got written about foam rubber? Okay. The adhesive that you use to stick foam rubber together The only stuff that I use is a 3M product. It's called Super 90 Spray Glue. When I first started using Super 90 Spray Glue in the 90s, there was only one place in town you could get it. It was Carolina Plastics on Shop Road. And to buy a can of Super 90 Spray Glue, I had to sign a hazardous materials form. That's how dangerous this stuff can be. Now, you can go to Lowe's and buy it. And you don't have to sign a hazardous materials form. Which almost surprises me, considering, you know, how the warning labels they have on everything nowadays. You know, sometimes I wonder how I ever lived to be as old as I am. We didn't have all those warning labels. But this stuff can be dangerous. I usually only use it outside. I have, actually my back porch, I have this big plastic sheet that is my backing board for spraying Super 90 Spray Glue. And it's probably got ½ an inch of Super 90 Spray Glue on it from over the years. I'm supposed to tell you that if you're using this stuff, you should wear gloves, latex gloves, or what's the others? The people that have a latex allergy, they have the nitrate gloves. You should also wear eye protection, and you should probably have a ventilator mask. I say you should. Now, I guess that covers me. Okay? I tend to do none of those things, but I'm a crazy old man, so don't listen to me.
He's a dangerous man.
My friend Sam said if I ever had a house fire at my place, that they'd have to call in the hazmat team. So I probably have 80 cans of spray paint in my closet, or my storage room, and there would be melted foam rubber everywhere. It would be a mess. So we hope that never happens. All right, when you after you use the spray, one of the worst things about dealing with this stuff is the nozzle tends to get clogged. After you use it, if you will turn the can upside down and spray it till the adhesive stops coming out, that clears the nozzle out. Otherwise, you start getting this buildup on the nozzle, and when you go to spray it, it's going here, and it's going there, and it's not going where you're pointing it. That can be dangerous. So try and make sure and keep your nozzle clean. Another thing you can use with foam rubber is contact cement. All right, my Hulk foot. The veins are actually slip latex or mask latex that I glued onto a sheet of foam rubber, and I used contact cement on that because I didn't want to get spray glue on the outside of the skin that's showing. So contact cement and Super 90 Spray Glue are the two adhesives that I use for foam rubber. And all this should be on the sheet if you got a handout. I'm sorry, I will bring some more tomorrow. I thought 50 would be enough. I'll give you my copy when I'm done. How about that? All right. Now, when you're spraying the foam rubber, say you've got two fairly square pieces, and you've got a nice flat 90-degree area. Well, when you go to spray it, you want to spray from what's going to be the inside of your skin. You don't want to spray it on the side that's going to be showing, because you'll have glue all over it, and so you want to always do it from the back side. And you want to spray both sides, and then you let it dry for about 2 or 3 minutes until it's tacky. And then it just sticks right together. Now, if you wait too long, it'll dry out and it won't stick. Then you have to put another coat on, and this stuff's like $13 a can. It's not cheap. it's something that you start working with it, you start to get a feel for it. You'll know when it's ready to stick. And when you're sticking it, you want to start on one side and kind of slowly work your way down. And if you have a really nice clean cut, it'll match up and be almost seamless. You won't even see it. Like on the hole, I can't even find this thing. There it is. Not too bad. I put a little latex fill on it, but that's one piece. Anybody wants to come up and look at this layer? This is on about a 14-inch extension. My foot's actually right there. Yes, I live dangerously. Pardon? No. The bottom of this foot is a piece of hardwood that I cut in the shape of a foot and put a rubber I use Super 90 spray. No, I use goop to adhere this pad to the wood, and the toes are actually styrene. But the pad of the foot is actually a really nice piece of hardwood. And then I have pipes, wood screws. It's like the big pipe, the piece that you would mount and then the pipe screwed in. And we have another wood piece at the top that's screwed to also. All right, where was I? Okay, so you want to work from the back side, and you work. When you're putting it together, you're looking at the front and make sure it all matches up. So once you have your two sides stuck together, then I tend to put these little reinforcement strips, like little Band-Aids, all the way down the seam. And what you'll do there is, you'll put Super 90 on one side of your little Band-Aid and put a little bit, right there, and then after they've dried, you stick it all together, and that way you've pieced all this. I'm worried about passing this around because I'm worried about it being taped. But if you will just grab it from the shoe on the inside here, I will pass it around so you can kind of take a look at it. Just, please don't pick it up by the foam on the side. All right. If you're spraying and you do accidentally get a little spray mount on the front side that you don't want, immediately take a little piece of scrap foam and just rub it while it's still good and wet, and you can take it right off as long as it doesn't set. That way, if you have any overage, any splatter, you can take it right off. Okay, but once it's dry, it's too late. Okay, now if you do accidentally get adhesive on your hands, if you don't use the safety equipment that I, for legal purposes, strongly recommend that you do, but if you do get spray mount on your fingers, they make this stuff called Goo Gone. It's a citrus cleaner, and it'll take it right off. So a little Goo Gone on your hands, wipe it off with a paper towel, get some soap and water, and you're good to go. Otherwise, it'll live on your fingers for a few days. All right, let's actually flip over. All right, so I've got a drawing there of kind of what the seaming and the Band-Aid look like. And then I have some kind of standard shapes down at the bottom left-hand side. I made a minion costume for my wife a few years ago, and to make the domed head, I had little semicircles. You can find this pattern online. That's where I found it. It was how to make a sphere from a 2D shape. And when I was cutting my foam, I had a circular cutter. You can get these at any sewing supply place. It's a circular blade on a handle, and if you got a good clean cutting surface, put your foam down there and use that, and it gives a nice clean cut, and your seams will match up. And once you glue it all together, and you have to do like one section at a time. You do one part, dry that, glue it together, then move on to your next one. You can't try and do them all at once, or you'll make a big mess. So yeah, again, patience kind of comes in handy. If you're going to put on my Hulk costume, I took fun noodles. Y'all know what fun noodles are? The little pool toys. I made his chest out of fun noodles for the ripples of the muscle, and then I took one piece of foam and put it over it, and then when I got to the edges, I trimmed the foam at the edge where it was going to meet the body part super thin. I took some scissors and trimmed it where it was almost paper thin, and then I glued it all together, and it was seamless. This is just something you're going to have to experiment with. The first costume I ever made out of foam was a Godzilla suit, and looking at it now, it's horrible. I mean, there are just big gaps, and it's like, ugh, that thing. But it was a start. So you start, you learn. I'm just always trying to improve and learn from my last project. A lot of this stuff you just really have to experiment with, and you start to get a feel for it. Foam rubber is expensive. You can get foam rubber at any fabric store again. I think you can get it at Walmart, but foam is not cheap. Almost everything I've ever made out of foam used to be somebody's carpet padding. I'm constantly looking on the lookout for building materials that people have thrown out. But you have to be careful. Foam will dry out after a few years, starts getting really brittle, and it's totally useless. So if you're going to grab some foam off the side of the road somebody threw out, you have to test it. And the foam that they're using, the carpet pad that they use nowadays, it's all these little bitty pieces that are all glued together. Stuff's useless. It's got to be one solid piece. I actually have a storage shed at my house that is full of foam rubber that I have collected over the years. You just want to be sure and trim around the pet stains and coffee stains and some. Pardon? Yeah. Oh, address? No, if you're really interested, it's on my business card back at my booth. Yeah, you did. Sometimes I will actually take a little Lysol to disinfect some found foam if it looks kind of suspect. But one man's trash is another man's treasure. Am I right? And another thing that I'm always on the lookout for, I have a huge pile of aluminum tubing. People are always throwing out lawn chairs and stuff like that. There's a guy named Griff. Griff used to work for Scallon Industries for production. These are the guys that are out in White Rock, and they make the costumes for the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball. They make costumes for Carowinds, Six Flags. They make these big mascots. And Griff, when he was a law student, was working part-time at Scallon, and he would come out and we would compete against each other. This was early mid-90s. I kind of really started doing this mostly at Halloween. I would go out to Halloween contests and compete and win money. And this guy Griff came out and started beating me regularly. But he made the mistake of letting me look inside his costume one night. He had this giant dragon. And I looked inside and I'm like, oh, that's how you do that. The whole thing was built on a backpack frame, and he had bolted this aluminum tubing and then just draped the foam over it. And so he had this giant dragon. It was like 8 feet tall, and he took it off that night, and I was like, how do you do that? The light bulb came on, and about 2 years later, I beat Griff. We were at it was a bar in the Vista, and I got a little overexcited. I beat him, and I beat you, Griff! I beat you! It took me 3 years, but I finally beat you! And he goes, okay, calm down, John. I am a little competitive if you hadn't figured that out. All right. So yeah, backpack frames and aluminum tubing. I was at the #1 Metro flea market a few years ago, and there was a guy there who was selling a set of pipe benders. Y'all ever see pipe benders? Know what pipe benders are? They have this long handle and a little curved slot that you put the pipe in. You put it on the ground and bend a little bit and bend it so you can bend pipe into whatever shape you want. The set had like different sizes for different size pipe. So if you want to build really big, massive costumes, backpack frame, aluminum tubing, and drape the whole thing in foam, and those big costumes are hard to beat sometimes. All right, let's see. Foam comes in different grades. This is a high-grade foam. This stuff is mega expensive. I got this free. I was driving by, they were refurbishing this hotel on Lady Street, and they were throwing away rolls of this stuff. I saw it, I'm driving by like, this high-grade foam! So I stopped my truck, and I grabbed every roll that I could fit in the back of my little pickup, and I still got a little bit left, but this is where you can sand this stuff. This is the stuff they use at Scotland. You can, this stuff in the 90s was $60 for a small sheet. I'm sure it's probably 80 to 100 or more now. But you pass that around. That was one of the kneecaps for the Hulk. No. Okay.
It was kind of hard, but it took me a while.
All right. No, but there are a lot of things I haven't tried yet. I was in Atlanta about 3 years ago. They have a convention there called GooCon, which is a special effects makeup convention. And they have some of the best names in the industry come down there, and you go to seminars. And I highly recommend it if you're really into this stuff. I got to meet a lot of the guys from the show Face Off. Became pretty good friends with Roy, and but I bought a roll of Warbler. Anybody here ever use Warbler? Me either. Oh, there's somebody. I bought this roll. It sat and gathered dust for 3 years, and I finally gave it to my son, and it's still sitting at his house unused. But I was watching the show Cosplay Melee. And this this girl had this mannequin of a girl. It was a female mannequin. She took the sheet of Warbler and a hair dryer, and she just softened that stuff up and kept pressing it up against it. And she had this incredible form-fitting chest plate. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing stuff, and I just gave it to my son. someday I will get the chance to experiment with Warbler. But you know, I'm just teaching what I know. Back to foam rubber. All right, so once you've made your foam rubber and you go to paint it, I learned early on, I made a costume that was called the Devil, and that was part of the name. We won't go into all that. But I was spray painting it, and I got a little too heavy on the spray paint. This was enamel, and it started melting the foam. I'm like, oh, that's not good. So I quit painting that area. So I found you can use spray enamel on foam, but you have to go very, very lightly. And but it dries really stiff. So if it's something that's going to be movable, don't necessarily, I mean, you know, start off with the enamel, spray paint enamel will work okay. Best stuff that I've found for foam rubber is Monster Maker's Mask Paint. There's a company called Monster Makers, and they sell all, you know, basically what they make is this, stuff to make latex masks and foam latex appliances. Arnold and the guys are a really good group. They're in Ohio, I think. The same people that put on GooCon in Atlanta sell the entire line of Monster Maker products. So his website is The Engineer Guy. And the shipping from Atlanta is a whole lot less than shipping it from Ohio. So especially if you're buying gypsum cement and it's like a 50-pound bag, it's like $4 freight from Atlanta. It's like $20 freight from Ohio. So yes, the Engineer Guy gets a lot of my business. But I will get it a little more into latex and foam latex and stuff tomorrow. But the Monster Maker's paint, you know, it's the little bottles, I don't know, $4, $5, $6. They do have like a minimum charge now, though. You have to buy at least $30 worth of stuff before they'll ship it or let you charge it. All right, so paint, there we go. I've actually used just the regular textile airbrush paint that you can get at Michael's, and that seems to work pretty well. It doesn't adhere to the foam quite as well as the mask paint, but it does work pretty well. All right, this is the dragon. This is the costume I made about 8 or 10 years ago that my son wore. My son had just turned 21. He wanted to go out with me to a Halloween costume contest. He wanted to wear the dragon. My son's a good bit bigger than I am. I wear an 11.5 shoe. He wears a 13. All night long, Dad, my feet hurt. Dad, oh, Dad. You wanted to wear it. Shut up. The dragon is a combination of paper mache and foam rubber. And then the wings were actually like thin plumbing pipe bolted together, and then I just sandwiched it between 2 pieces of faux leather that I stuck together with Super 90 spray glue. I laid one piece down, sprayed it, put my frame down, and then sprayed the other piece and set it on top, and worked pretty well. I've made a few wings like that, and it did actually open and close a little bit, not as much as we hoped. One thing I learned about this was I had the fingers articulated. So when I first made it, you know, I had little, I actually had guitar strings at the tips of the fingers, and I had these little metal rings, and I had joints in the fingers and springs so that it would spring, you know, back out. And when I first built it, man, they worked great. And then I wrapped them in foam, and they still worked great. And then I covered them in slip latex. Made it move too good after that. Like, oh, because they got the latex just really stiffened the foam up, and then they would just kind of go, Like, so I learned a valuable lesson there. Don't put latex on the articulated parts. But the arms and the legs are foam. The legs were actually built on, I bought some disco shoes with like, the 6-inch lifts. Yeah, the platform shoes. And that's what I built the feet on to have a little more height. Plus the fact that his neck was like 4 feet long. But I like to build big costumes. I was at Heroes Con a few years, and it was a girl named Riddle. She's a very famous cosplayer. She used to do the costume panel there, and we got a little argument one year. She said, one of the most important things you need to remember when you start making your costume is you need to make sure that it's comfortable. I said, no, you need to make sure that it's awesome. 3 years ago, I was at Heroes Con, and we were taking the big group picture of all the people there, and I'm wearing my Groot costume. Groot was made with insulation foam over a jumpsuit. I had a foam latex cowl and a foam latex appliance, and it was 107 degrees outside in Charlotte that day, and we were supposed to be taking this group shot inside, but the line to go see Stan Lee was backed up to the area we were supposed to do the photo shoot, so we had to move outside. I'm standing in the direct sunlight in a suit that is made to insulate pipes. After about 30 minutes, everything's going white. They finally snapped a picture. I'm ripping foam latex off. Get me out of this thing. So I go over. I had latex gloves. I'm seriously like, the water, the sweat that I poured out of those would have filled a pint jug. Each one of them. So I go over, get in the shade, I'm sitting on the bench. And this guy walks up and says, "Sir, I just want you to know, you're my hero." I'm like, well, thank you. Moral of the story, Riddle had a point. Comfort is an important thing when you're making costumes. My whole costume I can only wear for like an hour at a time. And then I have to get out of it and sit and recover for about 20 or 30 minutes before I can put it back on again. It weighs about 60 pounds. One of the things I love about MODOK, he's on rollers. I stand up inside. I just push him around. I don't have to support anything. I have a battery-powered fan inside MODOK. I get in there, switch it on. Brrr. As long as my battery's good, I'm good. Battery dies, not so good. It starts to get a little stuffy. Pardon? Okay, that was pretty much done. Thank you all for coming. I will be back tomorrow. I will be teaching on plastic sheeting, latex, foam latex, and basic mold building. Hope I can see you then. Thank you.